Yes, good morning. So last week we introduced lesson 7 and we started the conversation, this discussion on methods. What are methods? Why do we need method at all? And we talked about the let me just go back to our notes and yes. So last week we talked about method. We talked about what is a method? Why do we need method? Why do we use them? And we later introduced the user-defined method, and we talked about the difference, between um, an inbuilt method and a user-defined method. And we said methods are just collection, they're one or more lines of code that you have to call, you have to call them to execute them. They are also known as functions. What are we calling this method for? We're calling them to perform a specific action, We're calling this method to perform a task. And we talked about the inbuilt method. The kind of that's the type of method we have been using from our lesson 2 until lesson 6. We have been working with inbuilt methods. So we talk about the static method, we are talking about the instance method. However, we're using the one that comes directly from the Java library. So we are talking about the string class, the method within the string class, the method within the scanner class, the method within the math class. These are the types of methods that are inbuilt. And we said we don't have to write a special code uh to 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 create or to declare this method. However, all we have to do is to call on them when we need them. And how do we call on inbuilt method? We talked about this last week. And we said if it's a static method, don't forget your dot operator. What is your dot operator saying? Your dot operator is also your access operator. That's how you're accessing the method within a specific class. So for instance, in the math class, you want to calculate the max, the maximum number or the minimum number. What do we have to do? We have to call the class. We are accessing that specific method using the class. And we're saying math dots. The dot there is how we are accessing that specific class within the math method, or that specific method within the math class, the other way. So we also talk about instance method, the scanner class, for instance. The scanner class are inbuilt. However, we need to access them. We need to access them. We need to call them. And how do we do that? We need to call a specific class before we can use that method within that class. So we have to use our java.util and blah, blah, and we have to create an object, an instance of the class, because it's an instance method. It's an instant method, and you can differentiate between a static method and instant method now. However, um, we do not have control over the predefined methods, the inbuilt method. We don't have control. We cannot use them the way we want. There is a specific, way, there is a specific structure, that there are specific syntax that we have to follow to use a predefined method. There is a specific way you have to pass the parameters, the specific conditions to use them. And perhaps we have more special problems at hand, and we don't want to keep calling, we don't want to keep calling predefined methods. And we as the programmer as we now have the opportunity to do what? To create, write, declare, whatever definition you want to give it. You're creating, you're writing, you're defining, you're declaring a method. And this is what we call what? A user defined. User defined in this sense is not your grabbing values from from the keyboard, or you're asking the user to provide a specific value. But here, you as the programmer, you have what? You are declaring. You are declaring um, a method, and a group of actions to be performed. You're declaring that method, and that was what we introduced in on Thursday last week. And we said, why do we use um, this method? We talked about it helps us to reduce redundancy. So from the beginning of this class, I've been talking about technical debt, technical debt. How do you want to write our program in an efficient way? So it reduces so many unnecessary lines of code. You know, you can always reuse this method you've created as the programmer. And we call that what? Modularization in what? In programming. And it's one of the beauty it's one of the beauty of the object-oriented programming language like Java. You can always, we can always call this method at any time. Once they're public, once they're publicly defined, we can always use them and call them, call them at any point in our program. So that being said, we also talk about the syntax. We talked about the syntax, and we will go in details today. We'll go in details to understand more on the syntax when we have to write our user-defined method. And we talked about the modifier. What is the modifier here? What is the modifier? This is telling, this is how to declare. This is how we declare our method. Don't forget, it is a user-defined method, but it has to be within the class. You cannot write your method outside the class, and we will see how we do that today. And we said our modifier is how we access. So this tells the compiler, oh, this is a public method. This is a private method. This is a static method, not an instant method. So it's a public and static method. It is a private and static method. That's the modifier. It could be more than one modifier when we're talking about public and static, for instance. And we also have the return type. The return type. Void here is not, you know, void here is not going to return any value. So this is telling us if our method will be returning a value or not. And here we have void as the return type, which is not going to return any value. If you want to return a specific value, you have to know the data type of that value we are returning. So probably it's an integer, it's a character data type. And we can, change this void to that specific data type that we want to return. What does this return data type means? It's telling the compiler that once the method successfully executes, you don't have to give anything back to the calling method, which you don't have to give anything back to the calling method. Calling method could be our main method here. It could be another method entirely, and you don't have to give anything back. It's void. However, if we have an integer here, hence here tells the compiler, hey, you are returning an integer data type. If it's a string, hey, you're returning a string data type. And of course, that follows with the name. This is always user defined. The name, whatever name you've given your method, whatever name you want to name it. So, and this has to follow the lower Karma case. I mentioned that last week class. Don't forget our naming conventions. They are the standard recommendations when we are working with Java programming language. And our parameter list. What is our parameter? This is actually optional. It depends on the problem we are solving. So the parameter list is always like, what is the function? What is the function we want this method to do? And that's the purpose of the parameter list. In our curly brace, the opening and close curly brace tells the block of code. This code is associated with this method. And we have whatever we want to execute, whatever line of code we want to execute within this curly brace. So these are the things we discussed last week, and we talked, we really talked about this concept because they had a foundational, they had the basis of a user-defined method. You have to know how to declare. It is very, very important you declare your method, you define your method the right way. And we talked about some example. We will use the same example here that we have in class. We will demonstrate it today. And we will use that to illustrate the difference between the return type, return value, or return type. We talked about the two main types of return type here. The void, method that do not return any value. That's it, void. You're not returning any value. This method performs simple tasks actions, however, that do not return any value to the calling method. While our return values will do what? Will return. So this will return a specific value depending on the data type you have declared here. So this is going to return a specific value depending on the data type. And we'll talk more about the return value, return value type today. And we will see it's just the same way we have in our break, continue, return statement. We'll see how this is working. So before we start this demonstration, because we are going to write code today, before we start this demonstration, any question? Any questions? I just briefly summarize what we discussed last week, and we will see that more when we're writing our, illustrating, using simple codes today. And I just want to know if we are good, if we are ready to start writing codes, to start programming in general. Trust me, our code will become more complex, but I want us to be on the same page, on the same pace. We are, you understand all the concepts we have introduced before illustrating them. Any questions or concerns? Thumbs up if there's no questions, and you're good. We're good too. We're good too. Thank you. So, are we good to start? Let's open our programming environment, whatever environment you use. For class demonstration, we will be using IntelliJ, but you're free to use any language of your choice. I mean, any environment of your choice. I'm sorry. So let's start. If you organize things the way I do, which is good, lesson per lesson, which makes a lot of sense to me, because with this, I'm able to see which code is applicable to a specific a lesson. So let's call this some of norms, the same examples we have in our lesson notes. Some of norms, yes. Some of norms. Are we good to go? Do we have our environment opened and we are ready to code? Thumbs up if we have our environment open. So, we're good to start. Nobody have their IDE set open yet. There's a box covering. Really? Mm. Still covering? That's good. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for informing me. Because I could see my screen perfectly from my hand. Okay. Are we good to go? Do you have your IDEs open and ready to write your code? Thank you very much, Abby. Okay. I'm saying thank you. Let's give about a minute for others to have their environment ready and we can start. Okay, I think we can start. So this is the name of the class. And within the class, what do we have? We always have our main method. Our main method. So let's open the main method. Yes. Perfect. I'm gonna comment out. End of the main. This is the end of the main. And this is the end of my class. However, because we are working with user-defined method, and user-defined method are written outside. Don't get confused. User-defined methods are always written outside the main method. They are always outside the main method. So we are not going to write our user-defined method inside the main method. It will definitely has to be outside the main method. Okay. So what is the purpose of this user-defined? We want to see user-defined method demonstration. That's what we want to do in today's class. That's what we want to do. And we want to use, I want to use the return type to be void. So is that an instruction? I want my return type to be void. That means I don't want my method, once it executes successfully, I don't want it to return any value. I don't want it to return any value to the calling method. So what should I do? So what do I really want this this to solve? What's the problem I want to really solve? What's the problem? So problem itself. What's the problem I want to solve with this new method that I want to declare? I want to exactly the example we've been using in class, giving two integers, num1 and num2. I want to calculate, I want to calculate the sum and print the results. So that's what I want to do. So simple, so easy. And trust me, there are many, there are several ways you can solve this problem. There are several ways we can solve this problem. However, I want to use the specific user-defined method, and I want my return type to be void. I want my modifier in terms of how my method will be accessed. I want it to be public, to be available. What does it mean? Once it's public, it means my method can even be used outside this method. That is, if I have like 10 user-defined method, I can reuse that method. I'm making it public. I'm making it accessible to other methods in my code. And for this lesson, we will be seeing more of the private, private method, more of the public method. And for the last lesson for the semester, which will be lesson 8, we will see few examples of the private method. So now I have this idea of what I want to do. And I already know, oh, I want my modifier to be public. And I also want it to be static. Why? Because I don't want to start creating objects. I don't want to create objects to access this method. And I know for static method, I don't have to create an instance of the class. I don't have to create an object. So for this class, we will be seeing more of a static method. So void, that's my return method, my return type. Don't forget, I already made this as one of the instructions that I want the return type to be what? To be void. What follows the return type? Is always the name of my method. And this is always user defined, whatever name, whatever that you feel it works for for you. So I'm also using sum of numbers as the name. You could use anything. Can you see the difference between a naming convention? How I'm naming, you can see my methods start with lowercase. So methods and variable are always a lower case. That is, if I'm combining two or more words together, the first letter of the first word has to be in lowercase. Then the first letter of the other combined words has to be in uppercase. However, when I'm naming my class, my file, my class, for instance, you can see they are in the uppercase. The first letter of each combined words are coming as what? Uppercase. So I need to pass my parameters, but before passing that, let me finish the syntax. So I know this is the end of my user-defined method. And here, what do I want to do? What is the purpose? I already said I want to give two integers. I want to pass two integers to this method. So what am I going to do here? I'm just going to, you have to state the data type of the value. So, and that's the first variable, num1, and the other variable is also num2. Num1 and num2. Any questions so far? No, this comes up. Any question? Thumbs up if you are Clear until this point. Thumbs up if you understood what we've done thus far. Only happy? Okay, thank you guys. So what have we done? So easy. We want to declare, we want to define our user define method. And we already have the syntax. It has to be, we need the modifier or modifiers. It could be more than one. So we need the modifiers. We need to understand what is the return type. We need the name of the method. And we need the list of parameters we are passing into this method. So our modifier here is public static. That is, all this method can be accessed, will be available to other methods. Other methods can access it. It will be available to them. And it is static. We don't want to keep creating instance. So we don't want it to be an instant method. We want to be able to access this method directly from the class. In void, it's never going to return. Once it successfully executes, it's not returning a specific value. It is not returning a specific value to the what? To the calling method. It is not going to return a value to the calling method. And the name of our method, which is sum of numbers. And of course, the parameters we're passing to integers to this specific method. So if no question, I think we can continue from where we stop. And what is this saying now? What are we doing now? Yeah. Okay. So what we want to do now, because we want to calculate the sum. So to calculate the sum, we need to introduce something we call another variable, which is aims. It's an integer. Sum. That's the name of the variable. You could name it result, you could name it anything, but I'm using sum here. In this kind of variable, what does this kind of variable tells us? This is a local variable. What do I mean by local variable? This variable can only execute within this method. It can only execute within this method. So it is only applicable to this specific user-defined method that we have created. I mean, the sum of numbers. It is only accessible. It is only known. So in this block of code, you're going to use the sum outside. You cannot use the sum outside this sum of numbers method. And that's what we call local variable. We will see more in our next class when we're differentiating between local variables, global variables. These are just concepts we will introduce before the end of this lesson or by the end of this lesson. Okay, so now we have declared our local variable sum. So what do we want to do now? Don't forget, what's the problem at hand? We had to calculate the sum. So we want to calculate the sum. So sum now equals to what? Num1 plus num2. Right. That's what we want to calculate. We want to calculate the two parameters we have passed into this method. So sum, sum equals to num1 plus num2. So we know sum is num1 plus num2. So what happened is, what should we do? What are we doing next? What are we doing? We have to print. Don't forget, that's the other problem we're solving. We're printing the results. we have to print the result. It is always our system that have that prints. We're saying the sum of the sum of num1 and num2. So the sum of num1 and num2 is what? Is sum. Don't forget how we're concatenating, can concatenate. So now we have declared, we have initialized. Let's run this and see what's happening here. Oh, good. However, nothing is printed. Do you know why? Do you understand why? Nothing is on our screen. We have run this code. We can see our method has been declared and our method has been declared. We have even given some instructions to the method to calculate the method is calculating the sum, and we have asked the method to print. But I'm not seeing anything on my screen here as the output. Why? Do you understand why? You can unmute yourself, use the charts, Why? You can unmute yourself, use the charts. Why? What happened? What do you think? Or what are you thinking? Anybody willing to go? Anybody willing to share what they think is happening right here? I don't want to call names. We have people on call today. Do you understand what has happened? Why? Don't forget, in our last week class, I emphasized this. You can declare a method. You can declare it, you can define it. That's your function statement. You can do that. However, if you're not calling that specific method, it will not execute. You have to call it. You have to call the method. Now we have declared the method, but we have not called the method. We have declared, but we have not called it. We have not tell the method. We have not passed specific value to this method. We have not called it. We're not using it yet. So how do we call this method? How do you think we can call this method? So we have to go to the calling method. Trust me, your calling method don't have to be your main method, but for the purpose of this illustration, our calling method, let's use the main method. So what are we going to do here? We want to call the sum of numbers method. So we want to call this method. And how do we call this method? So all we have to do is sum. That's the name. You have to use the name of the method. And I want my num1 to be, for instance, 35. And my num2 is what? 45. So here I have called the method. Oh no, why is this coming up on the screen? So I have called the method here. So let's run this and see if this actions will be performed or not. Yeah, the sum of 35 and 45 is what? 80. So all I have to do to reuse this specific method that I've defined is to just call the name of the method. Call the name of the method. Any question? Thumbs up if you understand what we have just done. Let's let's go back to our notes where we have. Any question? Thumbs up if there's no question. Perfect. And you can see it is not returning any data type. It is not returning any value because it's a void. And you can see we have that in your notebook. Can see we have this is our declaration. We have declare. We have declare here. We have declare our user defined method. And this method is called the sum of nonce. That's the name of the method. We have declare. But declaring does not mean you call it to do anything. You have to call it. And we have to go within the calling method. The calling method do not necessarily have to be the main method. But for the class demonstration, our calling method was the main method. So our calling method for today's class demonstration was the main method, and we will see other examples in coming classes. So you can see now we have called, we have this is our call statement. This is our what? This is our declaration statement. This is our call statement. This is where we're saying nums1 is what? 15. Nums2 is 20. So here, the compiler understand this method here we have call it is now, oh, okay, so the number one you declared in your method is, oh, it's 15. Oh, the num 2 is 20. So all I have to do is to add 15 plus 20, giving me 35 and printing 35 in this scenario. You could use any value just for class demonstration. Any question? So let's do the same. Let's just do the same thing we did here. What I want us to do is the same thing we did here for void. I want us to do it for what? For a returning data type, for a returning data type. However, before we go into writing the code, we need to understand some basis, what are the basics, fundamental concept when it comes to return value. We need this keyword called return. Very, very important. The keyword called return. The keyword called return, it's just the same way our break statement works, breaking out of the loop. So the keyword called return does what? It's going to just exit. It's just going to exit. It's going to break out, whatever name you want to give it, of that method and return the calculated value to the calling method. So it's going to break out. It's going to break out of this method and return whatever value we have here to the what? To the calling method. the return statement here is always, let me pick my pen. The return statement here, this statement here, is always the last statement. Don't forget. When we're coding, when we're writing our user-defined method that is a return type, the return statement, because anything is return, the compiler will not execute it. The compiler will not even look at it because the compiler's instruction is that I have seen return. I need to return this value first before anything. So anything after the return will not be executed. That's why the return has to be what? To be the last statement in any code that has to do with return values type. The concept of return value is to return a specific value to the calling. Oh, I'm the one calling you. So I need to, okay. For instance, I'm calling on A. A needs to return that value to me. So whatever happens after the compiler says return, it doesn't matter to the compiler. The compiler understand that, oh, I need to return this value. I need to return. So I'm breaking out. I'm breaking out of this. I need to exit. I need to leave this method and return this value. Any question on this? Thumbs up if there's no question. And we can just use the same scenario. I want us to use the same scenario we used um for the void returning type. Oh my god, I need to go back and I need to erase this. So that being said, all I have to do is to come back here and I want to create a new class. And this, I want to name it sum of nums return because I'm illustrating return here. Perfect. So all I have to do, I don't want to stress myself to start writing. So we will trace through. So I'm just gonna copy and paste. This is the same value. I'm gonna remove this. Where I called it, and the return type will be what? I'm working with an integer at a time. So it's int, and what happens? What happens in my declaration here? What happens in my declaration? It's still public. It's still static. However, it has to return a value. So it's normal void. And I have to put the data type of the value is returning, which is an integer. Still the same name for my method, still passing the same parameters for this method. I'm still declaring my local variable as sum to calculate the sum between num1 and num2. I'm still calculating the sum between num1 and num2. However, I am not printing in this scenario. What I'm doing is I'm returning the value to the calling method. So how do I return? Have so many. Yeah, perfect. So am I going to return here? How am I returning? return. I'm returning what value? I'm returning sum. And that's it. I'm returning sum. But this has to be the last statement in my user-defined method, because any other thing outside the statement will not be executed. It will not. Because once the compiler sees the keyword return, it takes this value we have calculated here immediately to the what? To the calling method. So I was still going to use the same example that we had in our previous illustration, and that is we're using what? Our main method as the calling method. So I am saying, so what am I going to do here? I want to call. So call statement for some sum of numbers. So how am I going to call sum of numbers? Don't forget, exactly, almost the same way I called it previously. Sum of numbers, whatever value you want to put. This is for class illustration. I need to terminate consistent. So here, I have called it. I have called. I have called it. So let's run it and see. You can see this value has been called. So sum, but I want to use the return value. I want to print it. You know, I want to print it. So all I have to do is to declare another variable here. And you can always use whatever works for you. So I just want to use sum because I want to print the results. This is what kind of variable is this? What kind of variable is this? This is always a global variable because this is in the main method. You could use it in other method. Can see the difference between global variable and when we're talking about local variables? And I'm saying I want this value, sum, that is returned to be saved in this variable. I want this value to be stored in this variable. All I have to do, something easy, is to say sum results equals to what? Equals to sum of numbers. Whatever values we have given it so far. In my wife's table. So with this, what have I done with this? What I have done is to do what? Is to store the return value into a variable called what? Sum result. So I am storing whatever value, sum is. I am storing it into this container. And all I have to do, why am I storing it? Because I want to print. I want to print the results. And the system would have that print in here. I'm saying the result is, and I'm just gonna put it the value of some results. So now I can do whatever I like with the value that has been returned. I can put it in a different container. I can add it to another variable. I can do whatever I like with this value that has been returned to the calling method. So let's say I'm printing. I decided to print with it. So you could do anything. You could add it to another variable. You could save it in another container. The result is what? 80. Any question on this? Thumbs up if you understand what we just did, you know, and you can differentiate between a return and a void. Void is not returning anything. It is not returning any value. It is not returning any value to the calling method. Mm-mm. However, the return type is returning an integer in this demonstration. So it is returning an integer, which is the sum of num1 and sum of num1 and num2. So it is returning this integer, this sum, to the calling variable. And once it is in the calling variable, we can do whatever I like with it. For instance, I saved this into another container. I printed the specific container. I can add it to another number. I can always reuse that value. So I can do whatsoever I like with the return value, depending on the problem I am trying to solve. Thumbs up if we understand this difference and we good, thank you. Thank you. And that's the state between, when we're talking about the method return values or return type. We have the void, which is not returning anything to whoever is calling it, whoever is calling that method, whoever wants to use that method to perform a specific action. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to execute. However, in the other type of return type, which is specifying a specific data type you want to return, it could be an integer, it could be a character, it could be double, you know, we are using this keyword to return. And once the compiler reaches that keyword, every other line of code after the return keyword within the defined method will not be executed. And that is why it is always recommended that your return statement is the last statement when you're working with a value returning user defined method. You're working with a valid user defined method. And you can see we have other this is exactly the illustration we just discussed in class. This is for the void, this is for the return, the value return method. And these are other examples you could explore on your phone and explore this on your own, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to to support and assist you on any of your questions. So we have different examples, different illustrations on how to use, how to call, how to use our user-defined methods. Okay, if no question, I think we can stop here today. However, I have a class reflection activity I think it's just you having to provide. So I'm just gonna paste the password. Copy, trying to copy the password and paste it on chats. So you have that in your chats, and that will be 0. That will be what? Okay, 0414. That's 14th of April. So what you have to do is to take the first, it could be the first one, it could be the second, it could be the first or the second code that we did today. All you have to do is to what? To just attach it and just provide the code that we have done today in class. And that'll be the end. That'll be the end of today's class. Thank you very much. Any questions? So if no question, have a wonderful day, and we will see on Thursday. Yeah, we'll see on Thursday to finish up this specific lesson. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.